OK, punksters, so where are we? Other than here in my psychodelicious bedroom with murals courtesy of Harvey. Oh yes, West End Studio 2. The vicar was just milking his moment of glory after showing us how they made Billy G's voice sound out of tune. Well, he was not allowed to gloat for long. All this talk of missing tapes had distracted us from one important fact, namely that the recording with Billy G's hideously out-of-tune voice, fake or otherwise, was still available on the internet for anyone to hear. We were quickly brought back to earth as the telephone in the studio flashed and Ben answered it before handing it over to Billy G. "Yeah, you better come in and get it over with." As she said this, the door immediately opened and in walked the friendly PR girl from reception. She was not looking any happier.
"I'm sorry to disturb you, Billy," she said. "This internet thing is getting bigger and bigger. Apparently, Radio 1 Newsbeat have just announced it on air and given the fans the URL to go to."
Trust bloody Radio 1. They'll kiss your ass to get an interview when all's going well. As soon as you need a little help, they open up that great big corporate-sized waste pipe of theirs and dump all over you. She may have grown a lot richer since those early concerts, but it was good to see that her language remained just as fruity.
"We're going to have to make a press release. Do you have anything you want to say?"
Yes. That if I get my hands on whoever is doing this, I will personally tear their throat out and feed it to my pet budgerigar. A fair punishment under the circumstances, I thought. "Come back in 5 minutes," said the vicar. "We'll see if we can get you something worthwhile." And he motioned the girl back out the door. I noticed that she no longer questioned his authority. "It's simple," I said, putting my oar in where it wasn't wanted. "You've proved that the recording is a fraud, so you simply have to tell that to the press." "But you must remember," said the vicar, struggling with my naivety, "that the press do not want to be told that Billy G sings in perfect tune. Hardly much of a story. The fact that she sings hideously out of tune is a far better prospect as far as they're concerned." "But couldn't you show them how it was done?" "I doubt that we could fit all the music journalists in the country into this studio," he continued patiently, "even if they wanted to come, which they do not." "Then what?" "What we need is a second recording involving someone of impeccable reputation. If I were to produce a recording of Pavarotti singing out of tune, for example, then they might believe us." "Superb," I said, impressed as always by his ability to find the right idea at the right time. "You've got the CDs of the Three Tenors in your car. Nessun Dorma, out of tune. Brilliant." "It would be, if I could do it, but I cannot. You are forgetting, my dear punk, that I need the voice and the music separately. Otherwise, it will not sound like the singer going out of tune, it will simply sound like the whole tape machine speeding up and slowing down. A quite different effect." "Well, where are we going to find multi-track tapes of some well-known singer in the next 5 minutes?" "That is the problem that is currently occupying my mind. We need a recording where the music and the singing are separate." "Like the Beatles," said Ben, who had almost been forgotten as he sat quietly at the far end of the console. "I beg your pardon?" said the vicar. "Like the Beatles," repeated Ben. "You know, their early recordings which have the vocals on one side of the stereo and the music on the other." This was such a brilliant suggestion that I'm sorely tempted to rewrite history and claim that it was me that made it. Only, Rule 1 prevents me. If you've ever listened to any of the early Beatles albums on headphones, which I, of course, have never done as they're an old fogey band, you'll know that these albums often have the voice in one ear and the music in the other. The vicar tells me that this strange arrangement was apparently caused totally by accident. The original recordings were all mono, made for people with only one ear grown in the middle of their face. When, in the middle of the 1960s, people suddenly grew two ears and wanted stereo recordings, someone found recordings of the Beatles which had the voice on one track and the rest of the music on the other. These were never intended to be released. They were made so that the sound and volume of the voice could be changed at a later date. However, because there was apparently a ruling from on high that all Beatles recordings should not be altered, they were released exactly as they were, with mad stereo. Well, and that's the story anyway. The vicar, as you can imagine, was impressed by Ben's suggestion. "Benjamin, you are a genius," he said. "If ever punk is man enough to admit that he has not got the slightest talent for his job, then please feel free to apply for the job as my assistant. In the meantime, punk," he threw me his car keys, "I think you will find the CD of the Beatles' Double Red album in the car. Spitspot, time waits for no one, least of all you." I ran to fetch the CD, and it proved a simple task for the vicar to prepare a hideous version of Eleanor Rigby, with vocals even more ridiculously out of tune than those on Billy G's track. He then recalled our beloved PR girl and suggested that she announce to the press that the recording of Billy G was indeed a fraud, no doubt done as a joke, and that she had obtained this recording of Eleanor Rigby prepared in the same manner. You can then ask them if anyone doubts Paul McCartney's ability to sing in tune, he added. Perhaps we could also put it on a website so that everyone can hear it. Maybe even persuade Radio 1 to give out the URL. Totally illegal, of course, putting out an atonal version of the Beatles onto the internet. We shall probably get sued by Paul McCartney, he laughed. Well, not me. I'm merely your humble servant, he looked at Billy G. You will get sued by Paul McCartney, Sir Paul McCartney, and your manager, of course. If he had not mysteriously absented himself during this moment of crisis, we could ask him to try and get some form of approval. As it is, we will have to trust to EMI's, he turned and pretended to spit on the floor, spirit of goodwill, if that is not a contradiction in terms. He turned to the mixing desk. Now, Ben, I am sure you can make me an MP3 file of our Beatles classic. I'm sure I don't have to explain to any of my viewers, thieves, one and all, how to rip a track, make an MP3 copy and put it on the internet. If Hillary Rosen and the record industry had their way, we'd all be behind bars. It took Ben no more than 10 minutes to have a great sounding version of the track uploaded to Billy G's website, together with their press release saying that the original recording was a fake. I was convinced that we'd completely solved the problem. Congratulations, I said to the vicar, impressed as ever. It was moments like this that made me proud to work for him. Well, that'll certainly silence the press. I agree that if anything will shut them up, then that will, he replied cautiously. Although, a singer that cannot sing remains a much better story than some fan playing a practical joke. I fear it will take far more than the fact that it is not true to change a juicy story like that. You old cynic, I commented. Read tomorrow's papers, he said. In the meantime, we have indeed done all we can. He got up. It is time to leave Billy G and Ben in peace. It is most rude to disturb an artist when she is working. He bowed ceremoniously to Billy G and headed to the door. Now, I think we deserve one of those large beasts of delight that fine cafe in the corner seemed to sell. I do hope it is still open. Something suitably gooey. And ideally, we could close this chapter with the vicar and I heading off in search of large sticky cakes and, of course, the obligatory cup of Earl Grey tea. Although, unfortunately, we never made it. Before leaving West End Studios, while hitting the tickler, does anyone else use that phrase? The vicar had a bright idea that sent him marching straight back to Studio 2. Where would the world be without all the bright ideas that had been conceived in the little boy's room? At the beginning of chapter 4, perhaps, and one stage closer to a much-needed pint of speckled hen. Hey, Harvey, get us a pint, will you, mate? That boy's not cool. He's got ears the size of diamonds, broken nose and a twisted face, with a voice that I have a plane to catch to Edinburgh. There are 2 flights still available, one from Heathrow and one from Gatwick. The Gatwick flight leaves a little sooner, but Gatwick, he shook his whole body as if suffering from a fever. Such a proletarian departure point. I went up onto the rear deck and they made a show of announcing my departure by jumping loudly down onto the pontoon. A brave thing to do at the best of times and absolutely stupid in the dark without a torch.